Alright, welcome back to 18.1, stretching and compressing and reflecting sine and cosine graphs. So, we've calculated some stuff out. Now we're going to see what those graphs actually look like. So I know we don't usually start with an explore activity, but in this case we are, because I think it's going to be very valuable to see what, a standard sine or cosine graph would look like. So again, using our unit circle. And I also included not just radian measure, but also degree measure to help you out. We learned with our unit circle from the last 17.2 that this value here for x is our cosine value, and this value here for y is also our sine value. So rather than going split screen and showing you how to compute each one of these for sine of 0, sine of pi over 6, we're going to use this to kind of record some of our sine values here. And then we're going to plot out some points. Alright, so for sine of 0, so here if my degree value is 0, my, since remember sine is our y value, that would also be 0. Alright, moving right along, since pi over 6 is this value here, and this is my y value, sine is my y value, that would be about half or 0.5. Either one's fine, just so you know. Pi over 2, which is this value here, and my sine value for that one would be 1. Okay, let's continue kind of filling in this circle. So that would be 5 pi over 6, which is right here, and our y value would be 1/2 or 0.5. Now you'll notice I'm using decimal values because that's going to be way easier for us to graph than fractions, just so you know. There's pi, and our y value here is 0. Oh, I'm noticing a pattern. I wonder if, because I see 0, 0.5, 1, 0.5, 0. I want to say the next couple numbers, if the pattern's correct, is 0.5, 1, 0.5, 0. But before I say this is correct, let me just go and check each one of these. So 7 pi 6, our y value, oh, it's actually a negative. Okay, so I was kind of close. 3 pi over 2, our y value, that would be negative. Okay, and for the last one, 11 pi over 6, that would be negative. Now I know my my copy on my screen is not the best, but in your packet you should be able to clearly see those negative values, and if you don't, take some time right now, as I am trying to do electronically on the screen. Make sure your negatives are visible. And let's go ahead and plot these out. So that would be 0, 0. Okay. Pi over 6, that would be 0.5. Half would be 1. And 5 pi over 6, that's again half. Oh, half, I say. For pi, which is right there, I know that was hard to see, even for me, that would be 0. So it kind of goes up and over. I wonder what the other one's going to look like next. So that would be, what's the next one? 7 pi over 6, that would be about -1/2. 3 pi over 2, that would be -1. Again, it's a sketch. It's not perfect, but it's there. 11 pi over 6, that would be half. Come back, dot. And 2 pi would be 0. So it looks like, and I know my graph is not perfect, I kind of missed that last one, but it goes up and then back down. I'm sure it kind of just keeps going and does that same thing. So just keep that in mind. Sine will usually start at 0, 0. Okay, it'll go up and then down. So just keep that in mind for sine. Okay, let's see what this value looks like. Okay, so we're going to answer some questions from the Explorer, because I know I did the graph, but I guess I did not answer some questions. It says, what 3 points were x-intercepts? Well, I'm going to use my highlighter so you guys can see what that was. It looks like 0, 0 was one of those values. Pi 0 and 2 pi 0. Those 3 points were my x-intercepts. And it says what was the maximum value and the minimum value. Well, let me go back to that picture. So much easier to answer these questions when you have a picture. Make life simple. Put it in pictures. Alright, you'll see my maximum value, my highest value is about there, which was about pi over 2, 1. And the lowest value was 3 pi over 2, comma negative 1. So we're just going to record these down over here on our page and move on to the next one. So just so we can record those down, that would be our intercepts of, from the last page, 0, 0, pi 0, 2 pi 0. Our biggest value was pi over 2, 1. And this one would be 3 pi over 2, negative 1. Okay. Alright, moving right along, let's go on to finding cosine. Yay. Okay. So cosine, remember, is going to be our x value. So for 0, that would be 1. For pi over 3, which is right here, that would be 1/2, or 0.5. For half, that would be 0. Okay. For 2/3 pi, that would be negative 1/2, or negative 0.5. For pi, that would be negative 1. For 4 pi to the third, or I'm sorry, 4 pi over 3, that would be negative 1/2. 3 pi over 2, which is right there, that would be 0. 5 pi over 3, that would be 1/2 again. And 2 pi, which I'm guessing is right here, so not only is it 0, but it's also 2 pi, or 360. That would be an x value of 1. So it started at 1, and it went through some stuff, and then kind of came back. That's kind of cool. Alright, let's graph it. 0, 1. Pi over 3 is 0.5. Half would be 0. 2/3 is negative 1/2. Pi, which is right there in case you didn't notice, negative 1/2, or negative 1, I should say, negative 1. 4 pi over 3, that would be negative 0.5. 3 pi over 2 is 0 again. 5 pi thirds is, it's coming back up. It's going back at it. And 2 pi is at 1. So it kind of went down, and it went really low. Then it came back up. And I'm guessing it'll probably kind of finish, oh, come back, dot. It'll probably continue doing that over and over again. But notice for cosine, it starts at that value, 0, 1. So it starts high and then goes low. And then comes back up again. Okay. So now that we have our graph, let's go ahead and see if there's any questions they want us to answer. There are some questions! And actually, I don't know why there's 3 spaces, because there should really be just 2. Because it says, what are their 2 x-intercepts? Because as you can see, there was only 2. Let's actually identify our 2 x-intercepts and our biggest and lowest value. So I'm going to use a highlighter, because I just feel like there needs to be more highlighting in life. And let's choose yellow, shall we? So as you can see, I was not lying. There's 1 x-intercept and 2 x-intercepts. And those happened at the following places: here and here, whereas our maximum and minimum value are pretty much our highest and our lowest points. So our highest point was right here. Oh. And then our lowest point, which is down here at the bottom, happened at about here. So we're just going to record these values here and move on to explain 1 in just a minute. And those two x-intercepts were pi over 2, 0, and 3 pi over 2, 0. For this one, that would be for our maximum value, 0, 1. And actually, it happens again at 2 pi, 1. Whereas our lowest value only happens once at pi over pi, negative 1. Okay. Check back with us for 18.1 explain. I know you're excited. I am too. Check back with us.